Hello and welcome. I'm Blair Blackwell, and this is the Daily Cyber Brief. Here's today's rundown of the biggest cybersecurity stories you need to know today. This is the Daily Cyber Brief for December 15th. Today, the landscape is shaped by a stumble. From a new pro-Russian ransomware operation, a wave of actively exploited vulnerabilities, from routers to browsers and Apple devices, and a sharp uptick in sophisticated phishing, supply chain, and developer-focused attacks. Let's start with ransomware. A pro-Russian hacktivist group, known as CyberVulk, has launched a ransomware-as-a-service platform called VulkLocker, aimed at both Windows and Linux targets. Researchers at SentinelOne and others say the malware contains a hard-coded master key and other cryptographic implementation flaws that can allow victims to decrypt files without paying. It's not often we see a brand new ransomware service exposed as technically weak right out of the gate. But even a flawed platform gives the group infrastructure, affiliates, and experience they can quickly iterate on. On the vulnerability front, there are several live fire issues. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has added a high-severity flaw in Sierra Wireless Airlink Alias routers to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, after confirming active attacks. The bug, tracked as CVE 2018-4063, allows unrestricted upload of dangerous file types and can be abused for remote code execution on the devices. CISA is clear. This class of exploited vulnerability remains a frequent attack vector, and federal agencies are under binding orders to remediate on a deadline. That router issue comes alongside a broader exploitation surge. Dark Reading reports that so-called react-to-shell exploits for CVE 2025-55182 are flooding the internet, with some proof-of-concept code explicitly designed to bypass common web application firewall rules. At the same time, CIS has added another actively exploited flaw in Google's Chromium engine, CVE 2025-14174, an out-of-bounds memory access bug, to its catalog. Together, these point to continued pressure on internet-exposed services and browser-based attack surfaces. Apple users are in the crosshairs as well. Apple has pushed emergency security updates across iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS, watchOS, visionOS, and Safari to fix two WebKit vulnerabilities that the company says were already being used in extremely sophisticated attacks against specific individuals. One of the flaws overlaps with a bug Google just patched in Chrome, underlining the shared nature of modern browser engines. For organizations with mixed Apple and Chrome fleets, this is another reminder that mobile, desktop, and browser patch cycles are now tightly coupled. Meanwhile, identity and phishing risks are escalating. Researchers have detailed 4 new phishing toolkits: Blackforce, Ghostframe, Inbox Prime AI, and Spider-Man, that use artificial intelligence and advanced techniques to steal credentials at scale. Some can perform man-in-the-browser attacks, capture one-time passcodes, and bypass multi-factor authentication, turning what used to be a high-friction attack into a packaged service. In parallel, a massive data breach at South Korean e-commerce giant Coupang has been traced back to a former employee who kept access to internal systems after leaving, exposing data on more than 33 million customers. That insider-driven incident underscores how critical access revocation and identity lifecycle management have become. Developers and software supply chains are also in focus. One campaign is abusing GitHub-hosted Python repositories that pose as open-source intelligence or GPT utilities, but instead deliver a previously undocumented remote access Trojan called PyStoreRat via small JavaScript stubs. Separate research presented at Black Hat Europe points to a rise in supply chain attacks specifically targeting GitHub Actions, and urges a shared responsibility model for securing open-source workflows rather than relying solely on the platform provider. For teams leaning heavily on automation and open ecosystems, the attack surface now extends deep into build pipelines and tooling. So, who should be paying closest attention? Any organization running Sierra Wireless Airlink infrastructure or Chromium-based browsers, and any enterprise with a significant Apple device footprint, is facing a very active patch and prioritize moment. Online retailers, subscription services, and platforms holding large customer datasets should be thinking about insider risk and the long tail of departing employees who retain credentials. And development-heavy organizations, whether building internal tools or customer-facing platforms, are squarely in the blast radius of both fake GitHub repositories and the broader trend of attacks against continuous integration and deployment workflows. Looking ahead, the near-term watchpoints are clear. Expect continued exploitation attempts against unpatched routers and web applications tied to the React-to-Shell and Chromium vulnerabilities. With automated scanning and proof-of-concept code already in circulation, Apple's disclosure that its 0 days were used in highly targeted campaigns suggests more details may emerge about who was targeted and how. And on the phishing side, as these AI-enabled kits mature, we're likely to see more campaigns that blend convincing lures with real-time interception of one-time passcodes. Today, I'll be watching how quickly organizations move on the Sierra Wireless and Chromium vulnerabilities, and whether we see any spillover into critical infrastructure or service providers that rely on those components. I'll also keep an eye on identity providers and single sign-on platforms, given the combination of advanced phishing kits and the Kupang breaches insider angle. And for development teams, I'll be tracking whether the GitHub-centric attacks and GitHub Actions abuse drive new controls or just more warnings. The takeaway this morning: security teams face a crowded field, from ransomware experiments to live 0 days and increasingly professionalized phishing. But the underlying themes are familiar. Patch what's being exploited, protect identity as a primary perimeter, and treat your development and automation stack as part of core infrastructure, not an afterthought. That's it for today's edition of the Daily Cyber Brief. Thanks for listening. I'm Blair Blackwell. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not cybersecurity, legal, or financial advice.